Well, folks, we've got some new patch notes for 26.0. This is the expansion pre-patch to get ready for Festival of Legends. We're going to talk about some nerf reverts of cards that are rotating to wild format. We're going to talk about some balance changes for duels and a few other things in this video. So of course, Festival of Legends is about to begin. Here's some stuff about card reveals and pre-orders and so on, and here's a recap on the core set and the rotation. Of course, we've covered all of these cards in previous videos and all these details, so we're not gonna go through this too much. If you do want to read all this, of course, I'll put a link in the description to this post. We've also got a new event that's going to be rolling in on April 18th. After you've hashed out your set list and tuned up your instruments, an expansion celebration event will take place using the in-game event system from the 18th to May 2nd. Complete event quests, etc. You can get 4 signature cards, 2 copies each of 2 non-legendary cards, a standard pack, and a Festival of Legends pack. And I can't tell exactly what these signature cards. That's Void Virtuoso for Warlock. I don't know what that one is, but these new signature cards look really cool. Speaking of, here's a little update on the new signature cards stuff. I think we've seen some previews of this already, but this is a nice little new tooltip in particular that's going to show you the card text for the card. I think this is a really good little change. The card name and stuff, when you hover over it, that's going to be helpful since it's not showing up on the card itself. And this art, by the way, fantastic. I like that these look like actual art pieces, you know, like cool backgrounds and stuff. I think these are going to be far more popular than before. There are also some changes here to how signature cards are going to work in packs. Starting with patch 26.0, all signature cards, even the old ones from March of the Lich King, will also have duplicate protection and be able to be disenchanted. By the way, are the old ones getting changed to this new look or not, I wonder? I don't know. I don't think it said anything about that. But anyway, they will have duplicate protection and be able to be disenchanted for the same value as if they were golden cards. Signature cards still can't be crafted because we want them to feel special. Due to these changes, we've removed the rule that if you were awarded a signature card when you already have all signature cards, you'd get a golden legendary card instead. Now you will just receive a duplicate signature card that can be disenchanted. I think that's a good change based on the complaints I'd heard before of people not being able to disenchant their signature cards if they didn't want them. I think people wanted more flexibility to be able to turn those into dust. So unless I'm missing some nuance there, which is certainly not impossible because I do not pay a lot of attention to these disenchantment and pack rule sorts of things, I think people are going to be happy about that because now you can disenchant them, which I remember being a common complaint for folks. So next up are the card balance updates, and I think in most cases these are going to be reversions to prior changes, so things that got nerfed while they were in standard as they rotate out are going to get unnerfed, although I think there's a few exclusions to that, some cards that are getting kind of more nerfed but unbanned, which we'll talk about. I'm going to try to zoom in a little more on this, although I've already got this post zoomed in quite a bit. It's pretty tiny. So Demon Hunter Quest is going back to drawing 4 cards in one turn. I'm not going to try to speak to these and their impact on wild format. I don't play enough wild to tell you if these cards are now suddenly going to be good in wild format, but that's a pretty big change. I know that was a giant one for that one. Karya is going back to 6 mana. Can't imagine this being a problem card in wild at 6 mana. I'm sure that's gonna feel totally fine. Razormane Battleguard, I kind of forgot this got nerfed a long time ago, but going back to 3 health, that sounds like a healthy change. Kolkar going back to a 2 mana 2/3. I can see that maybe being useful here and there. Dragonbane Shot going back to 2 mana. I wonder if that's at all a problem with Quest Hunter stuff. Curious if that one pops up at all. Dawn Grasp, the reward for the mage questline, going back to 3 spell damage instead of 2. This would be scary in standard still, I'm afraid, but seems probably okay in wild. The Dawn Grasp hero power gonna go back to gaining 2 damage instead of 1 on honorable kill. Conviction going back to 1 mana. But this actually remains a pretty good finisher kind of damage output card in aggressive paladins and wild, if I had to guess. 1 mana for potentially 9 damage, very often 6 damage in the mid game is still really, really strong. Level up going back to 5. I don't don't think Odd Paladin gets played a lot in Wild these days, as far as I know, but maybe there's some Odd Paladin considerations there. Cold Blood back to 1. Feels fine. 2 always felt pretty expensive for that card. Garrote is going to go back to shuffling 3 bleeds instead of 2. I think that should be fine. Miscreant back to 5 health. I didn't remember this still being nerfed, to be honest. It's kind of surprising, but sure, I think that's going to be totally fine. Forsaken Lieutenant back to 2. Should be totally okay. I kind of forgot this guy got nerfed as well, even though that was pretty recently. Tame the Flames, part of the quest line for Shaman, is now going to go back to 2 overload cards in order to get that final step of the reward. Cool. Forgeborn back to 4/5. I don't suspect Elemental Shaman's going to be a deadly force in Wild, so reasonable change. Dark Pact back to 8 health. That's pretty cool. This is a card that got nerfed a long time ago, I feel like, to get more recently reverted. That's pretty nifty. Now, this change is important and different. The Demon Seed is now going to have 10 damage on each of your turns instead of 8, and 8 was already nerfed, as I recall. But more importantly, it is no longer banned. So they're slowing it down even more significantly nerfing it, and now no longer banned. Perhaps they're looking to explore some of the new fatigue synergy cards a little bit in Wild with this change. I'm not sure exactly what the logic or plan was. Maybe they just don't want to have banned cards in general in Wild and just want to try to balance through them. I think that's actually a pretty cool philosophy if that's the case. But I don't know, man. This still actually scares me a little bit. I'd be nervous if I were Wild players, but hopefully 10 makes it feel okay. I'm curious if Wild players out there are actually nervous about that change. Next up, Stealer of Souls getting kind of similar treatment here, going back to 4 mana from 6 mana, but the first card you draw each turn costs health instead of mana, as opposed to all cards costing health instead of mana. So really putting a limit here on how much damage you can deal to yourself for things like the Demon Seed. So maybe in combination with the slower Demon Seed and a slower Stealer of Souls, perhaps this won't be as big of an issue. So really limiting here how much you can turn that into aggression. But also they did make some changes as well to this mechanic. I guess we didn't talk about that. They announced on Twitter they're changing the way you actually do have to take the damage of spending cards that cost health. You can no longer be immune through those plays. So maybe this would have gotten changed anyway based on that change in mechanics. But you can't get these cards played for free any longer, at least. They actually have to deal damage to you in order to spend things that cost health. So I'm interested to see that both of those got changed, both the mechanics behind this and the card itself. Curious to hear what you guys think about that. Fiery War Axe back to 2 mana. Finally, it's time. I think that's going to be awesome. I wish that was also in standard at 2 mana. I would certainly welcome Fire War Axe's return. Now this change is pretty crazy. Warsong Commander going back to whenever you summon a minion with 3 or less attack, give it charge. Does this mean things like Frothing Berserker can get insane again on the back of Warsong Commander? I don't know. There's also some like cheap Wind Fury stuff like Crab Riders, if you give it charge, could be crazy. So really intrigued. That's kind of scary. Like this might be really, really good actually. Morshan Watchpost getting unnerfed back to 5. That certainly seemed reasonable. I kind of forgot these nerfs happened so very long ago. I guess the other one is not a 2/4 though, since it's not listed here. The 2 mana one went from 2/4 to 2/3, as I recall. Ice Revenant getting rebuffed again. This got nerfed when Death Knight came out, and we were all like, really? That's what got nerfed, but apparently since it's rotating, it's already back. Faceless Corruptor going back to a 5/4. Remember when this card used to be insane? Goldshire Knoll going back to 10 mana. Remember when this card used to be insane? Like a couple weeks ago. And then finally a dev comment here. Pandaren Importer will also be reverted after it is rotated to Wild, and Demon Seed and Soul Stealer will be eligible for full dust refunds, which is cool. So also some Battlegrounds updates here. These are basically updating these cards to fall in line with their new core set versions. These got buffs in the core set being brought back as magnetic cards, and it looks like they're getting buffed as well in Battlegrounds to sync them up, which I think is pretty cool. Also, some minion pool updates. Denathrius has returned, and Friend of a Friend has returned. Get you some extra buddy stuff. It's pretty scary, cool, crazy. And then next up is Duels. Duels is getting an update here, but I have to say I'm pretty disappointed because the last two of these patches, the expansion introduction patches, they both resulted in new content for Duels. Last time we got the Death Knight heroes with the Death Knight patch. Before that, we actually got Darius Crowley as a new hero as well on the .0 patches. In this case, no new content for Duels, just balance changes. Now, I don't know if that just means new content is like pushed back into a future patch, or if they're not planning new content. Hopefully it's not the second thing. That would be incredibly sad. Of course, Duels needs new content. But anyway, the Duels season will reset on April 4th, which is tomorrow. And this is important for those of you that care about Duels. At that time, Roskilde's Rumble and Festival of Legends will be added to card pool offerings. And ETC Band Manager and Roskilde's Rumble will be available for construction. Now, what that means is if you put ETC in your deck tomorrow after the patch, you will get offered Festival of Legends card pools because he is a Festival of Legends card. So that means you'll be able to play with new cards early in Duels starting tomorrow, as long as you have ETC in your deck. And you'll want to make sure you don't have too many other expansions, because then you might get offered a bunch of cards from other sets instead. But if you have just 3 total expansions in your pools for your cards, then one of those should be Festival of Legends every single time, and you can play with a bunch of new Festival of Legends cards, which I plan to do tomorrow, assuming it all works. And then everything opens up in full on April 11th with the release of the expansion. Now, there were some updates to Duels as well here, some changes, and some of these are pretty significant, which are going to dramatically change how these things play out, but I still wish they were, of course, just new content as well. So Outlander is now going to say, if you played a card with Outcast this turn, add a random fell spell to your hand. So just completely removing the like plus damage sort of stuff, and instead turning this into an Outcast synergy thing that gives you a bunch of fell spells. So some pretty crazy value generation potential there. Illidari Strike is going back up to 2 mana. I thought this felt weirdly cheap at 1. It felt so efficient at 1 and was pretty crazy at 1. So 2 feels like the natural fit there. Starseeker getting nerfed here. After you cast 4 spells in a turn, add a Moonfire to your hand. So I think that's a pretty significant change, actually. Sometimes getting that rolling and keeping that loop going where you're trying to generate all the Moonfires and that like final, flurry of damage can be a little tough. And adding, an extra spell requirement for each cycle of the loop is actually rather significant, I'd say. Plus just occasionally making it harder to get that first couple Moonfires off as well. That's a good nerf because that deck feels really frustrating to play against, I think. Well Equipped is now going to equip a random weapon from your class and set its durability to 1, so lowering the variance, but also lowering some of the crazy high roll potential as well, because now you can't get like the Druid legendary weapon that gives you tons of mana, for instance. But you might also get some more consistent like damage output out of this, because generally Hunter and it does say Hunter here, but it's actually Hunter and Warriors, so I don't know if you'll get both. I'm thinking you'll probably get both. But the fact that it says Hunter makes me think you might only get Hunter. Either way, Hunter and Warrior or Hunter generally are going to have more consistent like damage output, I think. Next up, the power up is going to overload 2 instead of 1. So making it a little bit more punishing to use that. This is, I think, most powerfully used as like a finisher of sorts, where you just push a ton of damage. So may not make too much of an impact, but sometimes we've seen some crazy plays on this, like just using this on a 1-drop or 2-drop early and kind of swarming the board, so that could slow that down a little bit. Connection's getting a significant change. Now instead of having to hit the button, it's just going to give you a random 1-cost minion at the start of your turn. So just a free passive value generator, which, I mean, much cooler, of course, not having to spend mana on that one. Moving on to Vile Concoction. This is cool because it's actually going to give you concoctions now. They took the name and had it inspired here. So no longer is this like +1/+1 thing, but you still get the poisonous play, and you also get these concoctions out of your hand, which is pretty cool. I think if you build for concoctions really hard, and this just gives you another way to reliably get them, some pretty neat stuff could happen there. Also some treasure updates, another buff here to Moon Beast, now down to 3 mana. I actually thought this started to feel okay at 4, so I'm even more intrigued to play this at 3. We had a decent run with Moon Beast. Herding Horn now down to 2. This card has just gotten buffed 1,000 times. It might actually be decent at 2, by the way. Like it doesn't take a lot of beasts now suddenly to make this worth it, and any kind of mid-cost beast is starting to feel really efficient. So keep an eye out on Herding Horn. Gatling Wand now down to 3 mana, which is going to make this a pretty nasty board clear in many cases. I think that's going to be a cool option now. Humble Blessings up to 5. Cool with that. This card could absolutely swing things like crazy, all the Onyxias and such of the world. So 5 is going to slow that down some. Adara going up to 8 mana. She was super good removal, so fine with that change. Tempest Fury going up to 5. I love this, slowing down some of the crazy burst damage. This used to be 3 as I remember, so 5 is definitely going to push that back a lot, particularly making it hard to weave in with hero powers. That's now like 7 mana on the first go, or happening on turn 6 after the equip on 5. For Warlock, Gift of the Gods is now, instead of drawing 2 corrupt cards, you're going to discover 2 corrupt cards and then corrupt them. So you don't have to necessarily build your deck in with the corrupt cards, which could limit your pools, I guess. Now you're just going to get to discover 2 corrupt cards instead. So maybe more of a general use sort of thing in this case. Collector's Ire for Warrior here is getting a really big change, and a powerful change too, I would say. 7 mana, it might still be too slow, but much better design on this card. Before it had to summon the stuff from your hand, now it's going to summon the stuff from your deck. So it's like this super recruit effect that can thin out your deck. You can build much more easily to it. You don't have to have all this stuff stacked up in hand, so you're not actually putting your resources into play. So way cooler. Interesting to see some recruit stuff happen here, maybe. Pact of the Lich for Warlock going up to 6 mana instead of 4. This was crazy efficient card draw before. All these bonus Fel Rifts on top of just drawing cards really affordably, so 6 probably puts that in a healthier place. Devout Blessings going up to 6. This was a crazy value generator sometimes. Putting a little more overhead on that feels fine to me. Rending Ambush down to 5. This card was definitely hard to make work. 5 might help a little. Stalker's Supply going down to 2. I actually didn't hate this card before. I thought there's some cool Secret Hunter stuff. So 2 mana, this looks really good to me when I didn't even hate it before. So those are the Duels changes. Again, no new stuff. I mean, some new designs, I guess, technically, but, you know, replacing old designs in those cases. So no new cards, no new heroes, no new artwork, none of that fun stuff. Hopefully Duels just gets more later. I hope this does not mean we're skipping new content on Duels, but feel free to speculate in the comments below. If I knew more, I probably couldn't tell you, but I don't know more. So I definitely can't tell you. Also, Arena here getting a little bit of an update, some new sets in Arena. And then finally a bunch of bug fixes if you want to read all this. Again, link down in the description below. So, I don't know, pretty cool update for Wild folk, some new events to consider, some Duels things that should be fun. I mean, of course, we're getting new cards in Duels with Festival of Legends, which will still make it enjoyable, but it's nice when Duels gets specific changes for Duels itself as well. That said, yeah, share your thoughts on all these patch notes in the comments down below. Thanks much for watching, and until next time, game on.